Here is part 2 of our cellular respiration notes. But let's back up and just do a quick review. Question 11 through 14. Figure 6.5 up here in the corner shows cellular respiration starting with glucose. Now the goal of cellular respiration is to get energy out of glucose. Where is the energy? It's in the bonds holding the carbons together. So in this picture you can see that electrons are stripped out of glucose and they are going to go down into a molecule that carries them. It's called an electron carrier, much like you have an Uber or Lyft taking passengers from one place to another. This electron carrier called NADH is going to shuttle these electrons to the main event, which happens to be right down here. So here we have electrons being moved by a carrier from one phase to another inside the mitochondria. So the electrons get dropped off. As you can see, the blue dots representing the electrons, they get dropped off. And this series of purple circles, ovals, these are proteins in the membrane. So actually the electron goes down the membrane, much like electricity or electrons flow down a wire. So that's why I have a squiggly line here representing electrons flowing down this membrane. When they do, they're going to make all this energy right here. So it powers the production of energy. These electrons have done their job. They've gone down the membrane and they need to go somewhere. So they can't be homeless. Remember, electrons are part of an atom, and these electrons have left their atom. So along comes a superhero. This is why we breathe oxygen. Oxygen is going to be the final electron acceptor. Much like Superman coming and grabbing someone falling off a building, these electrons have been cascading down the membrane, and oxygen is going to catch them. Combining oxygen with hydrogen, ions, and electrons, you make water. So that was question 11 through 14. What is the electron carrier? NADH. What happens to the electrons? They're going to combine with oxygen, and ultimately they're going to form water, as we saw right over here. What energy molecule is ultimately made? It's ATP. Moving on. This picture here shows the 3 stages that occur. Stage 1, 2, and 3 are named glycolysis, citric acid cycle, and this big word, oxidative phosphorylation. Another way of thinking about it is the electron transport. So we're going to go step by step into what goes in and out of each of these 3 phases. You can see from the outline of the mitochondria shaped kind of like a lima bean that 2 stages occur inside here. That is stage 2 and stage 3. Stage 1 is outside of the mitochondria, and it is in a place called the cytosol, which is another word for the cytoplasm. So here you can see this is the mitochondria that we are blowing up right there. And stage 1 is occurring anywhere inside of the cytoplasm. The first stage is called glycolysis. It takes glucose, which is 6 carbons long, and it is going to split it in half. It is going to go and grab the electron that was right there. Is this requiring oxygen? We're going to look at the arrows. Here is glucose. It's an arrow going into the process. And that's the only arrow going in. Here is oxygen. It's needed in stage 3. So the answer to question number 17 is no. Where does a citric acid cycle occur? Here it is, stage 2, right inside of the mitochondria. What molecules enter and leave the citric acid cycle? Hope I skipped 16, we'll come back to it. The citric acid cycle. It has an arrow coming in from pyruvate, and that's it for coming in. It has 3 things coming out. It has ATP, it has carbon dioxide, and this arrow at the top is going to the right, so it's coming out too. So we have NADH, ATP, and CO2 leaving. Electron carrier, ATP, and it was carbon dioxide. What goes in? Pyruvate, and pyruvate happens to be a 3-carbon molecule like that. So question 15 and 16, glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm. What molecule goes in? What molecules go out of glycolysis? Coming in, glucose. That's it. Coming out, ATP, pyruvate, and this line at the top, which is going to be NADH. So what goes in? Glucose, 6 carbons long. What comes out? Pyruvate, which is 3 carbons long. ATP, and NADH. We're just following the arrows. Why do we exhale carbon dioxide? There's carbon dioxide. Well, pyruvate is 3 carbons, and what enters here is 2 carbons. So we're going to get rid of a carbon. Also, this is a cycle, just keeps going round and round. When it does, it's going to get rid of excess carbon, which ultimately came from pyruvate having 3 and glucose having 6. So the reason why you exhale carbon dioxide is that this is a gas. The gaseous form of carbon is coming from the solid form of carbon right here. So we are getting rid of carbon. We only need the electrons that were in the carbon-to-carbon bond. We're going to grab the electron, throw away the carbon. Where does the electron transport chain occur? This is stage 3. You can see that it is right here in purple, and it's inside the mitochondria. What molecules enter and leave? Make 2 columns. What comes in? What's coming in is up here, NADH, and also FADH2. These are two electron carriers, much like Uber and Lyft are carrying passengers from one place to another. These carriers are transporting electrons from either stage 1 or stage 2 over to stage 3. What else is coming in? Oxygen. So this is why we have to breathe oxygen into our lungs. The oxygen gets into our bloodstream, goes into every one of the cells. All this happens by diffusion. What comes out? Water and ATP. So now we can fill in this question. What comes in? Electron carriers. What else came in? Oxygen. What comes out? Energy. And water. Why is the electron transport chain like a battery charger? Well, we're going to get it in the next picture. So I'll slide down to the next picture. Before we do that, circle this paragraph right here. It's going to answer the next 3 questions. Remember a battery, discussed in our last class, has 2 compartments, like a positive and negative pole? It's piling up ions in one side of the membrane. So that's going to happen inside of the mitochondria. It's going to pile up a bunch of ions. The ion that it piles up, it's right here. It's going to concentrate hydrogen ions. And we can say that simply by saying it's piling up ions on one side of a barrier. In this case, that is the membrane inside of the mitochondria. It's going to pile them up on one side, and they can't get back across until the cell opens up the channel. So in your cell membrane project, you know that cells can control these proteins when they open and when they close. So by active transport, it's going to pile up ions against the concentration gradient until it has as much as it can pile up on one side. This is potential energy. A battery is stored potential energy that can do work. What's the ion? Hydrogen ion. What would this potential energy concentration gradient be used for? What is the purpose of it? It is going to generate the energy molecule of ATP, and we're going to get that in the next picture. Turn on your red color here in Notability, and you are going to trace the path of electrons with a red line. You can make it a big red line. So, looking at this picture, zooming in, we can see here are the electron carriers. They are going to drop off their electrons, and the directions said for you to draw a path where the electrons go. Well, the path is already done for you right here, but we are going to do this in a different color just so that you understand that the electrons are dropped off at this membrane, and they're going to flow down the membrane, much like electricity goes down a wire, but these are electrons being passed from one protein to another. See, it labels these as electron carrier complexes. These are proteins 1 3 and 4 labeled right here? Well, there's 2. So like a hot potato, it's going to pass these electrons. And when it does, it is going to provide the power to pump these hydrogens that you see down here. Very few hydrogens. I can see 3 at the bottom and 9 at the top. So if you're going to go from low concentration and pile up more in one area, that is called active transport. It requires energy. Where's the energy coming from? The flowing electricity, the flowing electrons down this wire, down the membrane. Where do the electrons end up? Notice at the very end of your arrow that you drew, it points to oxygen. Oxygen is going to be play a critical role by accepting these electrons. It's called the final electron acceptor. It's much like a superhero. Like Superman used to fly by and catch someone who is falling off of a bridge or a building. Here, oxygen is going to grab the falling electrons and combining it with hydrogen. Electrons, oxygen, and hydrogen ions make water. So now we can answer these questions. We accomplished that by drawing a line. 27, where specifically are the electrons in the mitochondria? Name the internal structure. Interior membrane. We trace the path of the electrons going on the interior membrane. What ion is actively transported as the electrons travel this path? The hydrogen ions are going to pile up on one side of the membrane, and this is what a battery is. It's storing up potential energy on one side of the barrier. Circle with a green line the location where active transport is happening, where we're building up this potential energy. Change colors. There's 3 locations. Here is one active transport pump. Here is a second one, and a third. So why do you eat and why do you breathe? So that the food can be dismantled, grab the electrons and the bonds holding the carbohydrate together, throw away the carbon, you breathe oxygen, so that as these electrons that you've stripped out of food, as they travel the interior membrane of the mitochondria, it powers ATP to charge up the mitochondria like a battery. The electrons need a final resting place. They're going to combine with oxygen that you breathe. That's the sole reason why you breathe. And it is going to mop up the mess. Hydrogen, oxygen, electrons make water. We accomplished that. What molecule plays a crucial role? Oxygen. It's a superhero. What would happen if oxygen were not present to accept these electrons? Living in Southern California, I'm sure you have experienced a traffic jam with an accident. Stops the entire freeway. So if oxygen were not present, electrons would pile up here and it would back up the electron transport chain. Wouldn't happen. Active transport wouldn't happen. Hydrogen ions wouldn't pile up here. You wouldn't make energy. Stage 3 backs up. Stage 2 backs up. And the mitochondria shuts down. All of this requires oxygen, so it's called aerobic. The entire mitochondria here is aerobic. It requires oxygen. So if you do not breathe while you exercise, the majority of energy production is going to stop until you stop that rigorous exercise. Catch your breath, allow oxygen to get back into your bloodstream, diffuse into the mitochondria, and restart cellular respiration. So as hydrogen ions are passively transported through the ATP synthase, now we're on this last phase right here. You may have been up to Big Bear and recognized that Big Lake is being held in place by a dam. It's actually the road that you drive into the town on, and if that dam is closed, the lake fills up. If they open the dam, the lake will drop, and in times of heavy rain or snows, they have to open the dam to ensure that the lake doesn't overflow and damage properties with flooding. So that's what's happening here. We have a dam. This membrane that you see right here can only pile up ions. If it gets too full here, this is the only place for them to go down by diffusion. This gets opened up, and these hydrogen ions, like my pointer, are just going to flow right on through here. You can see that it has an arrow that shows it going like that it can spin. When hydrogen flows through here, it's going to spin this molecule, this complex actually, and when it does, it's creating kinetic energy of motion. And when it does, it provides the energy to change ADP right here into ATP. To change ADP, which has diphosphates, 2 phosphates, you are going to add 1 phosphate and it's going to become triphosphates, going from 2 phosphate molecule to 3 phosphate molecule. This is adding a phosphate. This is why it's called phosphorylation. It's actually adding a phosphate. ADP is the molecule that is low in energy. When a hydrogen ion, when an phosphate is added to ADP, it becomes ATP. High energy in ADP, low energy. When hydrogen ions are going through ATP synthase, the potential energy of the mitochondria is discharged. In other words, as hydrogen is leaving this area, it's losing potential to do work. How do we recharge it? You have to have more electrons come by for more active transport. So in other words, you just have to keep glycolysis and the citric acid cycle going so that you can transport the electron carriers to drop off more electrons here. What will recharge the potential energy? More electrons. Why do we breathe oxygen? It's the superhero that accepts electrons, and cleans up the mess. It's the superhero. Have you ever accidentally touched a live wire or been shocked by electricity? It hurts. It does damage. So electricity are flowing electrons. If you did not have oxygen here, these electrons coming down this don't have a place to go, so they bounce around, and like radioactivity, they're going to do damage to molecules. They're inside the cell, so they might even bounce around into the cytoplasm, start nicking other organelles, hitting DNA, causing damage. These are called free radicals. When electrons don't have a home, free radicals. It's known to cause premature aging, cause cell problems. So to stay healthy, you want to minimize all these electrons. You need to breathe properly. And where do these electrons come from to begin with? They're coming from food. So it turns out if you eat less, you create less free radicals. It's actually healthier in the long run for you to not overeat your calories. So free radicals can be soaked up by what are called antioxidant foods. These are foods that have oxygen and accept the electrons. So there's a lot to be learned about nutrition and how your body makes energy. This is a summary of the 3 phases. And you can see one of the main things is to get all these electrons to go to the main event. Stage 3, electron transport chain, where a phosphate is added to ADP to make ATP. That's called phosphorylation. Oxygen is required. But look, 2 ATP are made in glycolysis, 2 ATP are made in the citric acid cycle, and 28 are made in the electron transport chain. You need to get to stage 3. What does it take? It takes oxygen. It takes aerobic exercise. If you're weightlifting, your trainer is going to say, don't forget to breathe. Because if you forget to breathe, your energy production stops right here. Nothing inside of the mitochondria work. You can't make 30 ATP. All you can make is 2. This is called anaerobic. This is your body's fail-safe mechanism. If you're not breathing, your body can still eke out a tiny bit of energy that might be enough for you to run really fast away from danger. Get away from a burning building, for example. But then if you had to run a block, you would feel the pain of lactic acid building up. That's a byproduct of anaerobic respiration, and we're going to talk about that in the next step. As soon as you start breathing, then you are fixing the traffic jam. No oxygen, no place for electrons to go. This backs up, that backs up. And so the only way to get rid of that pain is for you to breathe, then it starts the engine up again in the mitochondria. Your job is to fill out question 34 and 35 with the information that you see in this picture and in the paragraph right there. These notes are due as homework, so turn them in for points.